Is zinc actually effective against the flu, or does it even work at all? Well, this is one of those questions we're going to answer today, because zinc is becoming more and more popular as a way to fight off the flu and the cold as we're heading into cold and flu season. And I'm sure many of you have heard about this by now, so let's talk about whether or not it works. Now, before we get into whether or not zinc works against the flu or the common cold, we should first ask ourselves, what is zinc? And I think you will be quite surprised to know that zinc is an essential trace mineral required for normal human biological function. It's involved in a lot of different things, including DNA replication and cell division. Zinc is also necessary for vitamin A synthesis, and it helps regulate gene expression. And so without zinc, our bodies can't perform a lot of these really important biological functions. And this is why if we don't consume enough zinc, problems start to happen right away. For example, zinc deficiency leads to poor growth and development, tissue hypoxia, impaired immune function, blindness, and even death. Now, even though we need relatively small amounts of zinc, only about 10 milligrams per day, it is an essential nutrient that we must obtain from our diets. And although it's found in many different foods, it's especially concentrated in animal products like oysters, which are probably the richest source of zinc on the planet. In fact, just 3 small oysters can provide almost half of the daily recommended amount of zinc. Other foods high in zinc include red meat, poultry, and beans. But other foods like phosphates, like whole grains and cereals, can actually inhibit zinc absorption. Now the good news is that most people eat enough zinc in their diets and they don't become deficient. However, some people who consume less meat or plant-based diets may be at risk for zinc deficiency. In fact, about 30% of people worldwide are deficient in zinc. This is especially true in developing countries where grains make up a large percentage of the diet, but they're often poorly processed and they can contain a lot of phytic acid. This can block zinc absorption, leading to a deficiency. But luckily, there are a lot of zinc supplements available to treat these deficiencies. So when a person is zinc deficient, taking a supplement can definitely help improve their immune system, their sense of taste and smell, and even their wound healing capacity. But this is different than using zinc to prevent or treat the flu or the common cold. So how much zinc do we actually need? Well, the daily recommended intake is 11 milligrams for men and 8 milligrams for women. If you want to learn more about the different foods that are rich in zinc and how much of each food provides how much zinc, check out the links down below in the description. But here's the thing, while zinc is an essential trace mineral and we all need to consume adequate amounts of it, taking extra zinc supplements to prevent the flu or the common cold hasn't been proven to be very effective, and it's something that scientists have been debating since the 1970s. There is a lot of conflicting evidence, and a lot of people will tell you that it works, and a lot of people will tell you that it doesn't. And this is why I decided to make this video to try to clear up the confusion so you know exactly what the science says. So does zinc work against the flu or the common cold? Well, to answer this question, we first have to define what we mean by work. So does zinc shorten the duration of the flu or the common cold? Does it reduce symptoms? Or does it reduce the incidence of getting sick in the first place? Because depending on what we mean by work, the answer could be completely different. For example, several studies show that zinc does shorten the duration of the common cold. Like this study here, which was published in the Annals of Family Medicine. This study randomly assigned 224 children to either receive zinc or a placebo for 5 days after the onset of cold symptoms. They found that the group that took zinc had shorter durations of colds, but there was no difference in symptom severity. Similarly, this study found that short-term zinc supplementation reduced the duration of the common cold by about 1.5 days. On the other hand, some studies have found no effect of zinc on cold duration. Like this study here, which was published in the British Medical Journal. This study looked at 269 healthy adults who took zinc for 5 days after the onset of cold symptoms. They found no significant difference in cold duration between the zinc group and the placebo group. In fact, this review here concluded that the evidence for the effectiveness of zinc in preventing or treating the common cold in healthy adults was unclear. So what about zinc and the flu? Does zinc prevent or reduce flu symptoms, or does it even work against the flu virus at all? Well, in general, it seems to. For example, this study here, which was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, found that oseltamivir, which is the active ingredient in Tamiflu, reduced both the duration of flu symptoms and the incidence of complications. But they also found that zinc did the same thing. In fact, they stated that their data support the use of zinc in the treatment of influenza. However, they did acknowledge that more research was needed to confirm their findings. So more research was needed back in 1978, and over 40 years later, that still hasn't happened. This is why we still don't have a definitive answer as to whether or not zinc is effective against the flu. And that's not because the studies haven't been done. We've actually studied this quite a bit. It's just very difficult to come to a clear conclusion based on the results. Like this meta-analysis here, which was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. This meta-analysis looked at 7 randomized controlled trials involving over 700 participants. They found that zinc lozenges were effective in reducing the duration of symptoms in adults with acute respiratory tract infections caused by rhinoviruses, which is the most common cause of the common cold. But again, they did acknowledge that more research was needed. And unfortunately, even to this day, we still don't have a clear answer as to whether or not zinc works against the common cold. And it gets even more complicated when we consider that there are many different types of zinc supplements and they reused in different ways. For example, some people take zinc for the first 5 days after they feel sick, while others take it for 5 days before they feel sick. Some people take higher doses, while others take lower doses. And there are different forms of zinc, like zinc gluconate, zinc citrate, zinc acetate, and different forms may have different effects. And finally, we have to keep in mind that not everyone is zinc deficient. About 25% of adults in the United States consume enough zinc to meet the RDA. So, if we're looking at people who already have adequate levels of zinc, does zinc actually do anything? And I think this is where we have to be careful, because there is a possibility that taking too much zinc can actually interfere with other minerals like copper. In fact, copper deficiency has been linked to some of the side effects of taking too much zinc. In one case study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, a woman developed copper deficiency after taking 150 milligrams of zinc daily for 2 years. Her symptoms included anemia, leukopenia, thrombocytopenia, neuropathy, and osteoporosis. All of these symptoms resolved after she started taking copper supplements. Although it's important to keep in mind that 150 milligrams of zinc daily is much higher than the recommended dose of 11 milligrams for adult males, it's still possible that taking higher doses of zinc for longer periods of time could increase the risk of copper deficiency. Overall, the evidence is pretty mixed, and we still don't have a clear answer as to whether or not zinc works to fight off the flu and the common cold. But this doesn't mean that zinc isn't important, because it absolutely is. Just ask anyone who has ever had a zinc deficiency. Zinc is important for immune function, wound healing, growth and development, and so many other important biological functions. And if you're deficient, taking a supplement can be life-changing. However, if you have normal levels of zinc, taking a supplement probably won't do anything for the flu or the common cold. If you enjoyed this video, check out my other videos on vitamins and nutrition. I have a ton of videos on vitamin D, magnesium, potassium, and so many other nutrients. And as always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching and supporting. And I hope you have a blessed day.